Hey guys, today we're going to talk personal training and GI health. I have my friend Karrie Danielson here with me today. Hi, Karrie.
Hi.
Karrie is a personal trainer, a fitness and bodybuilding contest and nutrition coach. She's a fellow FNTP and has recently completed the first step of restorative wellness solutions. So she is now also a certified GI practitioner. That's so fantastic. I want to get into the restorative wellness class here in just a little bit. But first off, I just wanted to ask you, how have things changed for you since you finished up the NTA course?
Well, first of all, I applied what I learned to my own life and my family, and I probably spew it around to everybody I know, and they're probably tired of listening to me. But actually, I'm planting seed, right?
Yeah.
So I know one example was a friend of mine who was having some severe GI issues and was actually had surgery to remove part of his colon.
Mm.
And we just had to sit down and I gave him some tips and he just ran with it. And now he's opened up his own health food store. And so,
Oh,
and he gives me a lot of credit for that. But I'm like, no, I just planted the seed. You're the one who ran with it. So I think if we just drop seeds, whether officially we're educating or just in conversation. So,
yeah. I love that you went there with that because it really is up to the client. I mean, when people come to us and they've got, even if they have something specific if they want to work on, it's always going to be up to them to take whatever we discuss and implement it.
yeah. And then he, like it spreads. Then he has a passion for it and he's spreading seeds and passion and just affecting way more people. So,
Oh, I love the ripple effect.
yes.
That's one of my favorite things about what we do because when people start to feel better, they're just like, "Oh my gosh, I did this." And then, you have
You
to
want to
try
share it,
that.
like you want to share this is happening for me and you can have this too. So
Yeah, exactly. It's so exciting when people start to feel better. Um, let's visit for just a second. You in the personal training world, what are some of the most common mistakes you see your clients making when in regards to nutrition?
there's a lot of confusion of like what to eat.
Mm,
I'll just go from the bodybuilding world. They kind of have pigeonholed themselves into they eat a lot of chicken, rice, and
mm,
like broccoli or green beans meal after meal after meal, and maybe some oatmeal in the morning. So they're eating the same thing day after day.
mm.
And so they manipulate their macros, and
Right.
sometimes they're eating, more chicken and or different meals. You'll manipulate carbs and fat, and a lot of times they see as they start getting really lean, they're dropping their fat to
Mm,
me dangerously low.
yeah.
And I know competitors that have had severe gallbladder issues and even had them removed. And
Oh,
now I know from taking the NTP class that how vital those fats are.
yeah.
And when you don't get enough of the good fats coming in, or the right fats, then that gallbladder gets congested and backed up and can become diseased. So they see that. Yeah, mainly it's just eating the same thing day after day for bodybuilders.
Yeah, that I think that's a really it's a really easy way to, like you said, to track your numbers, even if they're not into macros, even if they're just like calorie counters or whatever. People know what's in, like a handful of this or a serving of that. And so even when they go out, they tend to just kind of consume the same foods out of um, do you think it's like there's almost a fear element involved in some of that?
Well, a lot of them are following a dietary plan from a coach, and it's
Mm,
like they hand them a sheet of paper and you eat this. And
mm,
so they're afraid to stray from that. They don't know that, you can bring in substitute proteins, you can bring in different type of carbs, different types of fats. And I'm a big proponent now of like when I used to do it, I used to have my super lean ground turkey. It's
mm.
horrible.
Yeah.
And then I would add fat back in, like from nut butters or almonds. And now I'm like, no, I need to have the fat that goes with that meat.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of bodybuilders who do that. They'll add a little bit of, oh, I've got peanut butter today. And I'm like,
Mm.
the most bioavailable nutrients are going to be in the fat from that meat. So that's one thing I've changed for my clients is they get fat.
Yeah, it's really important to kind of inform people about that, the differences in the different kinds of fat. And it's not that, nut butters are unhealthy in any way. It's just that, when it comes to that preferred, fuel and the animal sources of protein and fat, they just tend to be a little bit superior nutritionally. And some people, there's even an absorbability issue with, nuts and seeds, things like that. So that makes total sense to me.
Yes. So I've learned a lot just in applying that to my clients' personal training and making sure they're eating a variety of foods and not pigeonholing into the same meals day after day after day. Because it's setting them up for food intolerances and
Mm,
sensitivities later on because, they're typically eating a lot of protein and typically north to south, they're not digesting all that protein and
mm.
very likely developing leaky gut. And then voila, they're sensitive to eggs, and they never used to be sensitive to eggs.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to ask you about, especially since you've just finished your course. I hear very good things, by the way. Um,
Highly recommend it once you have that NTP course as
yeah.
a foundation.
Oh, that's awesome. I think that food sensitivities, allergies, things like that can be pretty tricky for people. They're kind of hard to navigate. So, if we can kind of give some insight for people on maybe why those might be so tricky to kind of pin down, or a couple of the things that are like key to gut healing so you can maintain those.
Well, with restorative wellness, we have tools that we can identify a wide range of foods that a person is going to be sensitive to.
Mm,
It's the MRT test. And so, along with the GI map that tells us where the dysfunction is, we can actually, and you don't want to do a healing protocol that supports the body's natural way to heal without identifying offending foods. So the
mm,
MRT is a great tool, and it's a blood test, and it tests 170 different foods and food chemicals, your vegetables, your fruits, your proteins, dairy, and it's a bar graph, and it tells us how reactive you are to it. So red would be extremely reactive, yellow is moderate, and green is you're not reactive. But then you have a high green, like you're super close to being reactive.
mm.
And so then we have a protocol. And so for 3 months, we take away all reactive foods. And then you can allow the body the time to heal. And then you slowly reintroduce those foods one at a time and see if you feel, if you feel that difference, like fatigue, achy joints. It could be a skin issue. It could be GI pain. And hopefully, with that healing, then you can start having those foods again. So there's not that guesswork. Like a
Mm.
lot of people have problems with vegetables. Like I got mine done, and my go-to vegetables,
Mm.
broccoli, spinach. Granted, those are quarterings and oxalates.
Right.
What was the other? It was all my go-to vegetables. And I was like, So some of those are probably from me eating them over and over from my old bodybuilding days. But some of the things that came up are it's just my body doesn't process them well. So what
Hmm.
came up as a high reactive for me was honeydew melon. Like seems so benign, right? I
Right.
don't eat honeydew melon. Hardly ever have I had it, yes, but it showed up as a red for me. And I'm like, okay, that just is my genetics. My body doesn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
My body doesn't do well with cantaloupe, watermelon. So, but I don't like have any noticeable physical that I've noticed, obvious symptoms of it. But I had an immune response to those foods. So interesting.
Right. I'm glad that you used the word benign, because that really is what we tend to think about things. And I think sometimes people can feel like we get a little bit extreme in the types of foods that we will eliminate. They're like, why would you take out a whole healthy food? And so can you just elaborate a little bit on that for people that are maybe not familiar with food sensitivity testing, kind of like what that's showing is happening in real, like as your body's reacting to that food?
Right. So if you're eating a food that you're reactive to, it's eliciting a immune response. It actually can, it has a memory. Your immune system has a memory. So the next time you eat that food, then you're always going to have this immune response. And this immune response has different chemicals that are released in your body, and you're reactive to that food.
I think the symptoms of that can sometimes be a little bit tricky for people. They just assume that if a food is bothering them, that they're going to experience GI symptoms. And
Right.
and especially like in, in your realm of fitness, um, I think one of the things that people don't know about food sensitivities is that there can be sort of like this overall inflammation or, difficulty losing weight.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found any experiences with that where, people remove those offending foods and there's a change there for them?
Right. So the chemical messengers from the, I guess not messengers, but the chemicals released as part of the immune response
Mm-hmm.
can limit the lipolysis. So like you can't access your fat because of this chemical response. And it's the way your immune system's supposed to work. But it could be brain fog, it could be joints, it could be not sleeping well, it could be mood. Like it's not super obvious. Like those foods, I don't have any obvious symptoms. I don't get migraines. I don't have GI issues. Like from for example, the GI map, I didn't realize I was highly reactive to gluten. I didn't know it. I mean, I
Wow.
know gluten's not good for anybody, and
Sure.
I greatly limited it. But no, I'm highly reactive, and I don't have any obvious symptoms. Doesn't mean that down the
Wow.
road I wouldn't.
Mm.
So guess who went gluten free?
Good for you. Good for you. Gluten is kind of a hot button issue for a lot of people, and it tends to be controversial, I guess, but you really just don't know until you're in that boat, and then you stop consuming products containing gluten, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better.
I do feel better. Somebody asked me if I'd lost weight, and I was like, no, but I must have had inflammation. My face was
Yeah,
puffy.
yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it isn't necessarily weight all of the time. It really is an inflammation. That's one of the biggest thing that happens to me when I start to, maybe not be as careful, or maybe I haven't been as uh, good to myself, and my digestion's a little off, so I might be, developing some different food sensitivities or something like that. And it really is just kind of like this puffy, inflammation. Your body just gets almost kind of swollen and tender. But there's not a whole lot of numbers change. You just know that when you're trying to fit into your skinnies, you're just like, what is happening?
A friend of mine the other day, she sent me a picture of, she had gone gluten free and then she'd had some, and she sent me a picture of her face, big old bags under her eyes, and just,
Yeah.
I mean, she was highly reactive to it apparently. But yeah, that gluten, it is a hot topic, but
Mhm.
most of us should not be eating it because if it's a protein and it tends to kind of just through your intestine and can
Yeah.
cause leaky gut. So whether you're reactive to it or not, it's still causing damage.
Mhm. So what are some of your biggest takeaways from your new certification? Kind of those just eye-opening aha moments where you're like, yeah, gonna remember that forever.
Oh, just it was eye opening. There's a
Mm-hmm.
good foundation with NTP, but it just expands on it and just is deeper layers. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it just we have those tools that identify the dysfunction, whether it's the GI map, which is a stool sample, but it uses DNA technology. It's not just looking at a stool sample under a slide, which
Yeah.
misses 50% of what is living in you. So,
Yeah.
the GI map is a wonderful tool. It tells me if there's H. pylori, it tells me if there's pathogens, yeast, parasites, it tells me my beneficial flora, it tells me dysbiotic flora, which, think of like your garden. You've got the flowers, which are your beneficial flora, and your dysbiotic are the weeds. And that can become unbalanced. You might have low levels of the flowers, and then the weeds are starting to come up. And that identifies if I'm digesting protein or not, whether I'm digesting fats, and it gives me an inflammation marker, and if you're sensitive to gluten or reactive to gluten. And then we combine that with the MR2 sensitivity test, so that once you identify the dysfunction and you want to give them this healing protocol that helps them, just puts the body back in balance so the body will heal itself. But you don't want to keep eating offending foods. Yeah. Otherwise, it's not going to heal. So that's the value of the MRT, is we can actually identify those foods. And so it really allows the body the time to heal. And, from upper GI to lower GI, it's just a whole, it's foundational. In fact, digestion is the top healing priority of the body. So if this from, your stomach isn't breaking down food properly, it's a whole cascade of issues downstream. Autoimmune, migraines, rashes, you name it. If you can get your digestion on point, obviously you have to be eating whole, healthy, nutrient-dense foods, but you have to be able to digest them. And we're a culture of eat on the run, high stress. So 90% of us aren't digesting well.
Mm-hmm. That has to be so helpful in just bringing everything in like on target. Where you use the GI map, and it says specifically like, okay, we need to recommend some digestive support in the realm of fats for this person, or in the realm of proteins for this person. And that really has got to be super helpful in like tailoring supplements to your client, right?
Right. Well, we also always start with digestive function support. So we want to make sure they have enough hydrochloric acid, bile salts if necessary, if they're not digesting their fat, and enzymes to make sure they're digesting the food. And that's usually standard, just because there's so many dysfunction with digestion. And then unique to that person, what's going on with their gut flora, probiotics, and then there's antimicrobials that help kill off the little bad bugs in there, and just get everything nice and balanced and healthy, and allow the body to heal. It's amazing what heals once you heal the digestive tract. Autoimmune gets better. Yeah, thyroid issues can get better. Unless there's deeper layers to healing yet, but it's just amazing. Think of it like the immune system is just not on high alert all the time. And so the immune system can be used for other things that is going on in the body. It's not always just trying to control this constant inflammation.
Yeah, so that's a tendency that a lot of that my clients and myself will have problems with. If they're autoimmune and they have a lot of food reactivities, they'll get sick very often because their body's like so busy taking care of what's going on with this undigested food, and the body seeing those pieces of food particles as antigens, or something the immune system needs to go tag or dissolve or whatever, that when a bug, anytime you encounter anything, your immune system is just too busy to be handling some common cold.
I actually met somebody who never got sick, but it's because they were so unhealthy. They never got cold symptoms. I was like, wow.
Yeah, their body just won't mount a response to it, right?
And they thought they were super healthy because they never got a cold.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a misnomer. You always want to look big picture.
Right.
That's one of the things that we look at with, whether I think it's the NAC or on their health history, if they're like, oh, I never get sick. They're like proud of it, and you're like, So we have to match that up with some of their other symptoms.
I just ordered 10 GI maps ready to help people out, and then as necessary, we'll order the MRTs. But yeah, I'm ready to. I'm kind of transitioning from the personal training more and getting more specific into GI health, because I don't think I know anybody who doesn't have some type of GI dysfunction, whether it's heartburn, GERD, constipation, diarrhea, intestinal pain. Everybody, just about everybody I know has issues.
Yeah, there's a reason that they teach us that in our NTP course, that that is the highest priority for, kind of healing and supplementation. It doesn't really matter what issue a client comes to you for. If that part isn't addressed, things just are not gonna they're not gonna flow, they're not gonna balance, and it's that north to south, like you mentioned before. You've got to fix what's going on kind of in the beginning of that biological cascade, or the things downstream are just not going to benefit from it.
Right. So I like the foundational approach that the NTA and then now along with restorative wellness is then, you know, eating whole foods, properly prepared in season, local, and then digesting those foods. And people would begin to feel so much better. Their energy, you know, things that you can reverse, you don't have to live with.
Yeah, I think that just a lot of people don't know that it really can be, in some cases, as simple as changing over your processed food diet to a whole food diet, and people will see massive changes with just that alone.
Yes.
And then those targeted supplements can just make a world of difference. Instead of, like you said, with the GI map, you can literally read what they have in kind of what amounts, and what's prevalent in their case specifically, so you
Right.
can not only tailor the supplements, but like say, okay, these foods, are going to be beneficial in growing these good bacteria, and these foods we might need to avoid for a little while until we get, that microbiota balanced a little bit better. Yeah.
And getting the intestine healed, getting those tight junctions sealed and healed back up. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, that's huge. I would guess most of us have some degree of leaky gut permeability.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. So how soon do you usually see, benefits with people? You mentioned that it's usually about, it's 3 months, right? That you'll do the food removal.
Yes, and then unless it's in the red category and they're highly reactive, we don't introduce that food until 6 months. Um,
Okay.
and they may or may not work. It might be a food like now, just genetically, your body doesn't want that food. Um,
Yeah.
but the food sensitivities cause from leaky gut, and once you get everything healed up and sealed again, we call it heal and seal. Then you can try those foods and see if you're still reactive or not. And then you just want to get in the habit of having people, if they're meal planning, create like 3 or 4 different meal plans and rotate through those, so they're not eating the same foods 3 times a day every day.
Okay. That's a good tip. People tend to kind of like go to the grocery store and buy the same thing over and over, and even as the seasons change, they're not really eating different foods.
Well, we get habits of the foods we like, right? And we don't venture out beyond that. So it's a good time to try new things and get more creative with your cooking. It takes more time. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest hurdles I find when coaching somebody. They're just like almost defeated from the get-go, like, oh, it's going to take so much time to
Yeah.
create menus and then go shopping and then come home and chop and prepare everything instead of emptying a box, and or
Right.
whipping into the fast food place. But I think as soon as they start seeing results and feeling better, that inspires them to keep going.
Yeah, totally true. And the three things that I tend to run into most are, it's too expensive,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's going to take too much time,
Mm-hmm.
or my kids aren't going to like it,
Right.
or picky husband maybe, but
I know I had a client, she's like, we're kind of talking about her pantry and whatnot. And she's like,
Mm,
well, yeah, I have Cheetos. Like, my kids deserve to be kids, And I just, I kindly said, well, so you're setting your kids up for the same issues you're dealing with. And she was
yeah,
like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And I said, you just don't have to go crazy all at once, little
sure.
by little, start replacing foods, introducing them to healthier versions, and then do it over time. Don't do it all at once, or you'll have a huge revolt.
Hmm.
But
Hmm. You've got to have the family on board at least to a certain degree. And I like the kind of pieces at a time that you mentioned. I've had a few mom clients that will, they do it for themselves and they don't make very many changes with their family. And then they find themselves making two meals. Or like you said, they don't want to make the two meals. And so then they'll be like, okay, well, all of these things are going and this is the way we eat now. And everybody's like, what? So
Right.
yeah, revolt is a good word for that.
Well,
They're
they do. Like I have
like,
to say, before I learned all this,
mm,
I ate the sad diet, gave it to my children, didn't know better at the time. And so now
mhm.
I've got a teenager who's like, Mom, we don't have anything to eat. And I'm like, yeah, we do. We have plenty to eat. It's just that you don't want to eat it.
Yeah, teenagers are kind of funny that way. My son grew up eating mostly whole food stuff from about the time that he was 3,
But
but when they get their own money and their own car, they just kind of
and
go
they're
and do their
with
own
their
thing.
friends, and yeah,
Yes. Yep. Yep.
that's hard.
Social pressure and all that. It's okay. They'll figure it out eventually, right?
They will.
I mean, if it took us into our adulthood to figure out, I guess we owe them some slack in that department too.
Right.
So where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook under my name. My email is karriedanielson@gmail.com, all lowercase. And on Instagram, I'm love to lift 7. That's LUV, the number 2, lift, and the number 7.
Awesome. I super appreciate you coming to visit with me. You're my first practitioner that you've like broken down that GI mapping so well because that's not something I've incorporated into my practice yet, and it sounds like it's just really detailed and gives you such a better picture of what's needed for that gut healing. So thank you so much for that.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome.